Sunil, I think you can start recording once the session starts. Maybe 8:05.
8:05.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for reminding. Yeah. As a part of ISB Alumni Association of Hyderabad chapter, I'm Sunil. I'm the one of the chapter leaders. Samir, our president, is not able to attend the meeting today because of something which has come up to important. So he will watch the recording at the end. So we have here with us Dr. Jagdish. He's a senior consultant physician, specialist in internal medicine, infectious disease expert, and is currently leading the COVID committee member at AIG Hospital. So far, he has treated about 5,000 COVID patients. So he's one of the expert in Hyderabad right now. So we want to hear his thoughts on this and how to handle this second COVID wave, which is going through. And we haven't had peaked in Hyderabad yet. So we wanted to set up something before that. So I'll hand over here the mic to Dr. Jagdish, and I'm going to share his presentation. So go ahead, Dr. Jagdish.
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and good evening for the session. I think thank you, Sunil, for your kind words. Without wasting any more time, I'll straight away jump into my presentation. So, anyways, yeah, thanks for your first slide. So what are we dealing with? The amount of panic going on, the amount of situation, what we are facing outside. I thought, apart from just treating my patients at the hospital, once a very strong point what I have been noticing at the patients who are approaching to the hospital is, I think people are always coming to the hospital on the later stage of the disease. So with this intent, I thought we have to. It's ideal time that awareness about COVID. What exactly is COVID? What time are we supposed to reach a hospital? What time is some medical intervention is required, or what exactly can we do to prevent this kind of catastrophe? Is something which I am little interested in, apart from treating my patients per se in the hospital. So just talking about, I think people are pretty much well aware of the numbers, whatever has been happening today compared to the first wave and second wave. Why is this so serious? Yes, there is. Is there any difference in the first wave and second wave? Yes, of course. One strong thing is the amount of the cases which has been multiplying in this second wave compared to the first wave. Other important thing is, so few things are still not yet answered. So maybe that higher infectivity, what we notice, is it because of the transmission is more severe, or the intensity is more severe? Is it only an observation? Is it a myth, or is it fact? Though our experience and observations, I can comment certain things, still it has to be approved or declared by the official authorities of the government. So anyways, next slide, Sunil. What are the important things? If you notice, I just kept one single thing in this sudden search, not to mention that only Mumbai local trains have called all the cases, but the idea behind the common transport, the public transport system, what we have, or the malls, what we open, or the cinema theaters, what we have opened. First wave, India could successfully deal with the expected catastrophic calamity, what everyone is looking at India, that it can end up. Actually, speaking first wave, we have done a great job compared to all the countries, but this didn't last long. The moment we relaxed, within no time, we had this very bad second wave. It is, in fact, smashing to the level that no hospital is vacant at this time. In fact, no oxygen cylinders are available, not even our drug resources. So if you have to dig into the reasons, apart from the virus, is there any change in the strain? Is the change in the strain is the reason for the current situation, either in transmission or in the severity? But what I can tell is the relaxation in the public attitude. People just ignored what exactly we have gone through. People just ignored what the damage it has caused in countries like Italy and Spain and Brazil or US last year. I think now everyone has to realize India is going through very tough time. So the entire idea of today's program, I see a lot of youngsters. I really can't confirm or convey at this point of time. Is the virus more? It has got a stronger affinity towards the younger. Uh, younger age group, or is it because the younger age group is more into the public places, the infection is more high? But we happen to see very, very, very sad situations at the hospital that youngsters at the age group of 30, 35, 40 are just collapsing in a very bad situation. That is the whole ideology, because once you reach the hospital with a bad condition that you are not able to breathe, your saturations are very less, like 70, 60. And this is the condition now. It is, in fact, a one-sided journey. Even though you find a bed in the hospital, you can push for a few more days to weeks in the ICUs, but the end result, I think it's not so good. So that is the reason that the awareness among every single person is important, that you need to catch hold of this disaster at the early stage of the disease before it has progressed to that level that one has to run to the hospital. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So curbing the current active caseload, how can we do that? The only possibility is like test, isolate, and treat, and managing. So today, my whole discussion will be how could we test, how could we identify, how to treat them, and what are the treating modalities, and when to press the panic button, when to reach the hospital. So what can you do at the home? So this and all issues today I'm gonna talk about, because these are the most common doubts which most of my patients come across. Next, as I told, test, isolate, and treat. So let's revise the symptoms. If all of you remember what happened in first wave, I think everyone has to understand. This is again the commonest doubt most of my patients express. In fact, I don't even say they have this doubt. They come to conclusions. So when I say there are 7 or 8 important symptoms of COVID, that is fever, cough, severe body pains or muscle pains, shortness of breath, headache, sore throat, loss of taste, loss of smell, sometimes nausea and vomiting, sometimes diarrhea. So when we say this 8 cardinal symptoms, so somehow we always tell that any of the symptoms, I repeat again, it is any of the symptoms. But somehow the message conveyed to most of the people is they expect all of the symptoms. So a lot of people come to me after 7 days or 10 days when they notice their pulse oximeter, I mean their oxygen saturations in the fingertip, what they check. So when it is dropped down, or they develop a bad cough, when they develop a severe cough, chest tightness, they come to the hospital. When I ask, in this current pandemic situation, why didn't you come to the hospital at an early stage? So they say that, doctor, I had only fever. No, no, no. So when you have 8 symptoms, most of the people's consideration is like they should have the all 8 symptoms. No, again, This is something everyone has to understand. This is a cluster of symptoms that you need not have all the symptoms. Any one of the symptom you have, which is progressing over a period of 1 day, 2 days, please approach the nearby doctor. You can rule out COVID. If it is not COVID, it's well and good. If it is COVID, we treat early, we act early, maybe we are going to save your life. So I plead and I beg everyone, don't ignore any single symptom. Other important thing among all the symptoms, if your loss of taste and loss of smell is something which is earlier, then straight away you need not think about the possibilities of other diseases at all. See, after all this discussion, what I have noticed is a lot of people have taken. Of course, that's pretty much true. All other symptoms can be seen in different other diseases, whereas loss of taste and loss of smell is in particular with COVID. But that doesn't mean that if you have loss of taste, loss of smell, only you have COVID. Any of the symptoms also, you should suspect COVID. All the more if you have loss of taste or loss of smell, it's much, much stronger evident. So next. So what happened compared to last first wave and this wave, we have seen the symptoms are much more intensified here. In the sense, I'm seeing more of prolonged and persistent fevers. First wave, we didn't see this prolonged or persistent fevers. One second, just come back. So this is about test. This wave, we are seeing prolonged or persistent fevers, severe headaches. When I say severe headache, it is in a pain scale of 1 to 10. 1 is very minimal and 10 is very high. People are experiencing nothing less than 7 to 8, sometimes 9 severity scale on the headache. So severe headaches, extreme fatigue or extremely severe body pains and high temperatures, 102, 103. I think until proven otherwise, everyone should consider that fever could be a COVID fever. So anyways, now how to test it? Yes, what are the methodologies we have? What are the ways we can test this? As everyone knew, RT-PCR is the gold standard. When again I say about test, there's a lot of confusion. I think I do agree that the amount of information floating around, so people can't understand. So everyone are confused, out of confusion, out of panicky. Everyone tend to do whatever the test which is nearly available or which is pretty much available on the internet. So simply speaking, it's all about 3 important tests, but I don't consider the rapid antigen. This rapid antigen is a test. In fact, this is good for screening large amounts of people. For example, if you're attending a meeting, you can't do RT-PCR for everyone. So rapid antigen, where your test results comes within 10 to 15 minutes. So rapid antigen has least sensitivity and specificity, but that is only advantage with rapid antigen is something your report is within minutes. But otherwise, as a doctor, I don't recommend anyone to have rapid antigen until and unless we are saving time and immediately we want to know. And now coming to other tests, it is RT-PCR, which is gold standard. When again I say gold standard, it doesn't mean that it is 100%. So every test has got its own limitations. I think this is one thing which is the biggest thing, the biggest flaw in medical system, what we are facing through. People not understanding or utilizing this RT-PCR and straight away jump into their own conclusions. So when I say RT-PCR is gold standard, getting checked with RT-PCR is completely accepted. But what is happening is you do understand the best of the technique with the best of the timing of test also, you might miss 30 to 40% of the COVID positive cases with RT-PCR. So please don't consider your RT-PCR negative as COVID negative. When you have RT-PCR positive, the chances of being you having COVID will be 100%. But if you're RT-PCR negative doesn't mean that you are COVID negative. If your symptoms are still persisting, you have to go for the next level of the test. That is what we recommend, CT scan. So next slide. So this is other bigger doubt a lot of people have. As I told, RT-PCR is the diagnostic test what we are doing. One have to understand this RT-PCR. I get a lot of reports every day. A lot of people text me, a lot of people WhatsApp me. So doctor, please take a look at my test. So am I okay? Do I survive? Do you recommend hospitalization? So again, I am just very keen in putting forward this point. RT-PCR test has a value called as CT value. CT value is called cycle threshold value in RT-PCR, which all the more reflects your viral load. But viral load is not going to reflect your severity, because this particular value varies from day to day, because your illness or the disease is a progressive and regressive thing. I mean, what I mean to say, any disease to that matter of fact, it is a dynamic thing. So a lot of factors are involved to say the severity of a disease in one person. Let it be your age group, let it be your build, let it be your immune status, let it be your comorbids in the sense other disease or chronic ailments what you have, like diabetes, hypertension, anemia, or malignancies or something. So when we talk about RT-PCR, so it only gives me an information of whether you are positive or negative. Again, if the symptoms are persisting with the person and the patient has got RT-PCR negative report, I still insist for them to be in touch with the clinician and go for the further test if required. So RT-PCR, please don't get confused with the CT value on RT-PCR, because it is nothing to do with the severity or the expression of the disease. Next, the next, CT scan. Again, this is other important test, very important test in COVID. But please get this test done. Until and unless your doctor has advised, don't go for this test, because everyone has to understand a CT scan is more a diagnostic tool. So when a doctor asks a test, there should be an inference of the test. What is it helping us? Is it going to give us to find out the disease, or is it going to help us to plan the treatment of the disease? So CT scan is something in COVID helps you to identify whether the patient has COVID or not. So when a patient has got symptoms persisting and your RT-PCR is negative, and still I have a doubt whether it is COVID, that is the time you require CT scan. So otherwise, what exactly we are seeing outside, people, the moment they get a RT-PCR positive, immediately they go and get CT scan. Not required. The idea behind getting a CT scan is to find out whether you're COVID or not. When you have a positive RT-PCR report in your hand, please don't go for one more test, that is CT scan. CT scan is all the more required when you have a RT-PCR negative to confirm, are you missing a COVID case with an RT-PCR negative report. So hope I'm not confusing you, but anyone who has RT-PCR positive, please, you don't require a CT scan until and unless your doctor needs it for some other purpose. In simpler terms, don't go and get a CT chest without the prescription of a doctor. So CT chest is much more needed when the symptoms persist and RT-PCR is showing negative. Now, again, there are two numbers in your CT scan report. Everyone are afraid, worried, or confused about these two reports. So I've just put this. One is the CORADS. The second thing is the CTSS. So CORADS is nothing but it talks about the probability or the possibility of this is COVID infection or not. CORADS is nothing to do with the severity of the infection. So I repeat again, CORADS, everyone is afraid. Doctor, I have CORADS 5. Doctor, I have CORADS 4. So please understand, yeah, based upon the pattern of the shadows or the images in the CT scan, the expert radiologist comments that this could be COVID. So this is all about trying to tell whether it is a typical COVID or non-COVID. If you see the table on this presentation, so CORADS 1 is highly unlikely of COVID. CORADS 2 is unlikely. CORADS 3 is equivocal. It can be COVID, it cannot be COVID. CORADS 4 is probable. CORADS 5 is highly likely. So CORADS, when we talk about CORADS, it only tells us the infection is possible or not possibly COVID. It is not going to talk about the severity. So next slide. Oh, sorry. I think the next slide. The next slide is something about CTSS. I think it is placed elsewhere. The CTSS score that talks about Sunil. Just one slide before. One slide before. Yeah. No. This CTSS. So when I talk about CTSS is CT severity score. The CT severity score is something in a fraction what we give 1 by 25, 2 by 25, 7 by 25. So 25 is considered as full involvement of the lung, and this 1 by 2 by 10 by is about the percentage of the lung involved. So please understand that CORADS is only about the possibility of COVID, and CTSS is about the severity of the COVID infection. Next slide. So this I clearly told most of the people. In fact, we have been observing in this, particularly looking at a lot of youngsters being affected, and they always take it granted somehow. These people are immune that they never get COVID infection. Even though 1 or 2 days they have fever or some symptoms, you go get your RT-PCR. So the moment they get RT-PCR, as usual, 60 to 70% people show RT-PCR positive. The rest of the 30% are missing the test. It has been escaped, or their test comes as RT-PCR negative. So what is that you have to do? Whenever you have a doubt and you have RT-PCR negative, how to interpret and what to do. So what to do is always in your hands. Getting the test done is what you are supposed to do. Please don't interpret yourself based upon negative, because persisting symptoms and you have an RT-PCR, my immediate recommendation would be CT scan. But the trick here is CT scan. Are we supposed to do the CT scan in first 3 days, or should I wait? So if you see, as the disease progresses only, you develop shadows in the lung. Ideally speaking, any patient who has symptoms for more than 5 days, I think something can be picked up in the CT scan. If you have 1 day fever, you get a RT-PCR negative report, immediately doing a CT scan on day 2 may not help you, because having an RT-PCR negative and repeating a CT scan on the same day, which is very early part of the disease, again, it will put you into confusion, because you again think nothing in the CT scan, RT-PCR negative, so you feel that you don't have COVID, stay back at home. After 4 days, 5 days, you still ongoing fever is there. You think it is not COVID, something else. Straight away after 7, 8 days, you'll end up in the hospital. So I insist again. So RT-PCR negative should be followed by a CT scan, provided your symptoms have already crossed 5 days, or best is please consult your doctor. Let the doctor take the call when you are supposed to go for CT scan. Is it the early part? Is it the later part? And let him conclude, are you having COVID or not? Next test. Next slide. So that I think the last line what I was mentioning is a lot of the people who come to the hospital in very bad shape are observed to be RT-PCR negative people. So RT-PCR negative, they assume that they are not having COVID. So they take it granted that it is some urine infection, some dehydration, some physical exhaustion because of traveling. So they themselves convinced that this is not COVID, and later they come to a hospital in a very bad shape. So RT-PCR negative is very, very misleading and cheating test until and unless it is being monitored by a proper clinician. So again, the same table which I am trying to do, RT-PCR positive, isolate yourself immediately. So when someone is RT-PCR positive, it is straight away understood what you are supposed to do. So isolate yourself, and something wrong, go to the doctor will treat. RT-PCR negative, so still you have tests. So I mean, still you have symptoms, go to the doctor will ask for a CT scan. CT scan shows positive, go ahead. If CT scan is not picked up, let him correlate with yours, which phase of illness you are and what to do. So next. So yeah, managing, this is something, what can we do at home? Once tested positive, or what are we supposed to do at home? I think everyone know at this point, you have to isolate yourself, stay at one point, make sure you don't come in contact with others, because the infectivity of any person's right from the starting of the symptom, their infectivity is somewhere around 11 days from day one. So everyone should make sure that a minimum period of 11 days, plus or minus we keep additional 3 days for quarantine, because one can't identify exactly when their symptoms have started. The other thing is, what are the things you are supposed to keep at your home? I say the first and foremost thing is pulse oximeter. If you want to survive the current scenario, if you want to survive the present pandemic, the one thing which can actually can give you every information, or it can help you to make sure you are safe, is always the pulse oximeter. So pulse oximeter is available everywhere. It costs around anywhere between 600 to 2000, depends upon different companies. Now I can't promote or suggest any company, because as of now we don't get any companies possible, but still, whichever company you have, try to procure one pulse oximeter for sure. Everyone should have the normal. So everything is pretty much seen there. SpO2 is the oxygen saturation, PR is the pulse rate. So pulse rate is quite variable. It ranges from 60 to 120, depends upon someone is sleeping, someone is panicking or whatever. But SpO2, usually you don't see much range. A normal person should have anywhere between 96 to 100. Elderly people who has old lung issues, some cardiac issues, we give a margin of anything more than 92 is good. So any patient who's suffering from fever and having COVID, and you are observing yourself a home quarantine, make sure that you check your oxygen saturation morning and evening at least twice, 2 to 3 minutes each time. Preferably, you can check on multiple fingers just to make sure that everything is okay. So rest and all. So thermometer, I only mercury thermometers are best. Your thermal guns or this infrared thermometers are really not good, but still having one is always good to identify. Glucometer, yes, elderly people, of course. Otherwise, not a mandatory for every COVID patient. And blood pressure monitor, yes, if you have, it's good, but still it is not a mandatory. Pulse oximeter, everyone should have. Next slide. As I told, SpO2 is something, oxygen saturation. Next is pulse. Next. Mask, of course. Okay, so this I told you. What are you supposed to do? Next. So this is home management is very simple. You have to be in touch with every whoever are at home quarantine. Please don't take it granted. The most and important aspect of any home quarantine patient is one thing, having a pulse oximeter. Number two, having your physician in hand. So you have to be in contact with one of the physicians for sure for your smooth run of the home quarantine. Next slide. Yeah, and what are the possible drugs? So far, I think the recent updates, I'm talking purely medical thing, except paracetamol, that is a symptomatic management for body pains and headache and fever. There is not even one single medication has approved that it is a direct treatment for COVID, except that the other multivitamins like zinc, vitamin C, and vitamin D. There's nothing wrong in using that, but is it gonna treat your COVID? It's just like treating any other disease. It's gonna boost up or help a person's immunity or his overall health condition, but this is not a direct treatment for COVID per se. And Budecort inhaler, the recent study, what they have done in UK as well, we are using inhaler. Budecort is nothing but inhalational steroid. So anyway, steroid by this time now entire world knows that steroid is the Sanjeevani. Steroid is the Sanjeevani for COVID. But you know, steroid has multiple complications. It has to be used with the supervision of a doctor, when to start, how much to start, how to start. Inhaler usually will not have much side effects because this is not systemic. So Budecort inhaler, everyone keep, not mandatory thing, but that is something which is important for people who have chest tightness and continuous cough. Next slide. Yeah, next. Yeah. So managing mild cases, that by this time everyone know, try to isolate yourself, having your mask on, and make sure you continue the social distance from the family people, have a separate washroom, and try to have your own dishes or whatever. Next one. Yeah, open windows for ventilation. Yeah, coming to the food. Now again, there is a lot of myths about diet and nutrition. To that matter of fact, every doctor asks you to eat well. Now the biggest challenge is what to eat. So agreed, when anyone have fever, particularly viral fevers, your appetite comes down very badly. It looks nauseating. You cannot eat well. You don't feel like eating, but make sure that try to hydrate yourself as much as, try to have 3 to 4 liters of water. And coming to food, any food which you regularly eat in the home is sufficient enough, as long as you are taking in sufficient quantities and ideal proportions. In the sense, try to cover carbs, try to cover fat, try to cover protein. There is nothing like you have to rush for exclusive protein food, like only chicken 3 times, only chicken. Yeah, only chicken, fish,
Excuse me,
eggs.
doctor. Sorry to interrupt. Hi, people, those who are not on mute, can you please go on mute? We are having some disturbance. Thank you.
So this is other important thing which I always ask everyone. A lot of people ask after the whole discussion of the treatment. So people always are interested in, doctor, should I get the chicken? Should I get eggs? So it's not like I'm not against chicken, eggs or anything, but I tell you, this is not a mandatory diet for getting over COVID. Eat anything what you are been eating all the time. There's nothing like you eat today chicken and egg and tomorrow you are throwing the, you are making sure that COVID runs away. So this is because a biggest taboo or myth what it has been imbibed into everyone's brain. And because whenever I go for rounds in my hospital, so how are you? When I ask, the first question I ask, how are you doing, is all right. The immediate answer they give is, doctor, I got dry fruits. I'm eating dry fruits. So dry fruits, chicken and egg, trust me, this is not your treatment for COVID. If you have, that's nothing wrong in having, but don't make sure that just because you're having chicken, eggs and dry fruits, then you have done with COVID. Okay. Try to eat light, try to eat healthy. When healthy means all green, fresh fruits and vegetables, all dal makhni, chawal or anything. There is nothing like, so treat COVID like any other viral fever. When viral fever comes, all doctors ask to eat well, preferably light food, not like heavy oily, heavy spicy. Okay, next. Lemon pickle, there is nothing specific about lemon. It's all about the nausea feeling you have, the bland taste you have, so that we recommend something. In fact, we give your lemon C or lim C, the vitamin C chewables also for that reason. So next slide. So this is very important. The red flags of hospitalization. One is the panic button. When are we supposed to be? What is the things we have to be cautious when someone is at home monitoring their levels? So everyone, I told everyone should have their pulse oximeter. Keep checking your pulse morning and evening. Even 3 times you check also doesn't matter. 2 times is reasonably okay. Because a lot of people are obsessive. Some people are panicky, some people are obsessive, some people are afraid. I understand the visuals, what we see in the media, the messages, what we come across, it's very dangerous. But no patient whose saturations are more than 96, 97 can all of a sudden go sick within 12 to 24 hours and suddenly collapse. No, it's not going to happen. So COVID is something about a progressive illness over a period of 7 days to 10 days. The worst phase of the illness is usually seen in day 8 to day 13. So everyone, please understand, don't get afraid. The moment you have a RT-PCR positive, people start panicking. Nothing like that. So treat it as any other viral fever, but the possibilities of having the cytokine storm or sudden deterioration in few people happen over a period of 2 days to 3 days. So you will have all the possible signs and symptoms if at all you are landing up. Your saturations come down, you feel extremely high temperatures continuously running for 2 days or 3 days. You have extreme fatigue or weakness. When I say extreme fatigue and weakness, a person not able to get out of bed, a person not able to go to washroom, a person not able to even do his routine activities like able to eat or just move from one place to other. So as long as you don't have any of the symptoms, don't worry. Don't be obsessive looking into your pulse oximeter. Second important thing, yes, one slide before, please. So second important thing, because of varied qualities of pulse oximeters, we always see different values. Don't worry. If till today afternoon your saturations were like 96, 97, and you don't have any symptoms now also, evening sometime you check your saturation was 88. Don't get panicky. Please don't get panicky. It could be the grip of the pulse oximeter not good on the finger. It could be your finger is little cold, maybe you are in a much chiller place in an AC. So try to check your pulse oximeter in different fingers. Try to rub your hands and then check pulse oximeter. If all the time in all the fingers, even with a gap of 2 to 4 hours, your pulse oximeter still shows less than 92, that is the time you have to come to hospital. But don't worry, Even if you are continuously less than 92, if you approach the right hospital, the right management, you are still safe. Nothing will happen for within very shorter period of time. Okay, so my red flags for admitting into hospital, though we say 94, 92, less than 92, admission into hospital, extreme fatigue and weakness that nothing is going in, not able to eat, not able to move out of bed. It is a requirement for a criteria for admission into hospital. The third important thing, persistent fever, fever of more than 1 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit or more continuously for a period of 42 to 48 to 72 hours, in the sense for a period of 2 to 3 days, in spite of continuously using paracetamol or Dolo 650. I think that is other strong reason one should come to hospital. Sudden drop in blood pressure, this otherwise tells that a possibility of active viral infection is going on. So next slide. So everyone has to remember that the 4 things, anyone who's having COVID and home isolation, the red flags is low saturation, persistent fever, extreme fatigue, and drop in the pressures. Please report to the hospital. This is if anyone who's coming to the hospital early, in according to whatever I told, you are 100% safe. This we can assure. All the people, all the bad stories, what we are visualizing in the media or whatever, is only people who didn't have awareness or who are not aware of, or people just neglected and take it granted. So make sure anyone who follows this, I'm 100% confident that we are not going to miss any single case. Next slide. Again, what is the big difference? What it makes from hospitalization and staying at home? Yes, if you come to hospital, we have an extra things to monitor, and involvement of a couple of drugs. One is remdesivir. Every one of you know. Ideally speaking, using remdesivir is best judged if it is given in first 5 to 7 days, because that is the viral phase of the illness. Preferably, even before 10 days is also accepted. Next slide. Dexamethasone. Yes, this is what I talk about, the steroid. So steroids, we have multiple things. As the UK trial they have done on the very larger number of patients, they have used dexamethasone. Otherwise, some centers use methylprednisolone, use steroid, take the form of tablets or injections at the right time. That also I prefer. We don't use in the first 5 to 7 days of the illness. Later on, we start with steroid. So don't use steroid without a doctor's prescription or doctor's consultation. So steroid is life-saving. As long as you have steroids, as long as you have pulse oximeter, as long as you have a doctor consultation with you, I think we need not worry about COVID. Next slide. Tocilizumab. So this is something I don't want to go into the deeper part of the drugs because this class could be more in terms of the public awareness who are non-medical people. Though we do some academics, particularly when we talk about guidelines of the treatment to the fellow doctors. So tocilizumab doesn't have a proven RCTs. RCTs is randomized controlled trials. But it has its own criticism, because one trial has proven that tocilizumab didn't have benefit, but later on one more trial has proven it is good. But all the more, the ideology behind this is a very strong immunosuppressant. It suppresses our body response towards the virus. So what actually happens is, virus comes on one part and our body tries to fight with the virus and the body, these two fighting together, the end result, the damage is seen in the body. So when we suppress, when our immunity is suppressed, the fight which we are giving from our body comes down, so that the virus can't do. Virus per se don't damage our body. Virus damage our body through our own immunity. So tocilizumab is a drug which suppresses our immunity and make sure that we don't have a very strong damage. But the idea behind using this drug is completely a doctor's choice, and we have to use it very judiciously and cautiously at the right time. Anyways, tocilizumab, because there is a lot of hype or lot of unnecessary discussions going on tocilizumab. So that's the reason I kept in my slide. I still personally believe there is a huge role of tocilizumab, provided it has to be used in the right period. And the window period of using tocilizumab is very, very, very small. So the moment a doctor takes a decision that tocilizumab is necessary, from that time, at the most 12 to 24 hours is what we think that it is useful. Beyond that, it may not, because a lot of black market going on. You don't find the drug, don't try for 2 days, 3 days, and 5 days. If you don't get the drug from the time of your decision within 12 to 24 hours, please don't try for it. Because I have seen people spending lakhs of rupees to procure this drug after 2 days or 3 days from the time of requirement. So that's the reason I kept. So don't unnecessarily try for a drug which may not be useful when it is not timely administered. Next slide. Self-imposed lockdown. I think now that stop looking at the government, stop criticizing government or officials that they haven't done their job. Everyone has to understand it is our own fight. Everyone has to stay home, and self-imposed lockdown is the solution. Is the only solution as of now. What I can see that. Anyways, this is the smallest request what I can make. So next slide. So I think this everyone know, mask should be on. The recent practice says it is double mask is something which is important, keeping yourself safe and keeping the other person safe. So double mask, 6 meter distance, and sanitized hands is a must. Next one. Get vaccinated. Yes, I think vaccine per se is a different class. A lot of people do have a lot of doubts about vaccines. One simple message what I can give: both vaccines are equally good. Both are authorized by Government of India. Both vaccines are supplied to all over the world. So no confusion. Both vaccines are good. Don't worry. Whatever vaccine is available, immediately take. And the difference in efficacy will be only very minute. And other important thing is, as science is dynamic, when we do a study on 1,000 people, the result will be one. When the same study is done on 10,000, the result is something. When the same study is done on a lakh, the result is different. So the same thing happens with vaccine to vaccine. As the months progress, as the years progress, each vaccine will take an upper hand. So don't look at the numbers, both are reasonably okay. If there is a huge difference of efficacy, some vaccine is like 50, the other vaccine is 90, I agree, you have to go for 90. When I guess this both vaccines hardly have 1 or 2% difference in terms of efficacy. So I think one shouldn't wait that they should get a better vaccine. That's absolutely is nonsense. Next slide, please. I think questions, these are the most common questions I get through when we talk about vaccine. So someone who has first dose and later get COVID, the biggest doubt they have is, when do I have the second vaccine? So ideally speaking, vaccine to vaccine, the difference is minimum 4 weeks. That is for vaccine, and for Covishield, it is 6 weeks. Is the recent government guidelines is recommended. But in between, someone develops COVID, so you can wait for from the starting of COVID, you can wait for 6 weeks for the second dosage. This is what it is recommended at least. Or RT-PCR negative after your COVID, you can get the second dose after 4 weeks. So rather than not getting confused, anyone who gets COVID and they're looking for second dose, the second dose has to be after 6 weeks from the first day of your symptom. Okay, next slide. I think the same. I think the Covaxin is 4 weeks and Covishield is about 6 weeks. Next slide. I got to know that people are getting COVID after 2 doses of vaccine. Yeah. Please understand, first dose you have 50 to 60% of protection. After second dose you have 80+% of protection. Still, after 2 doses of vaccine, it is not assured that you will not have COVID at all. But what we have noticed is the severity is significantly decreased, or the incidence among 100 people who have taken 2 doses, the possibility of getting COVID is very minimal. So please, vaccine is really good. It is working. That is the only hope we had as of now, as well as that is the only thing what we are experiencing, because most of the doctors whom we are almost living with COVID patients every day, we are still able to do our job. It's only because of vaccine is what I guess. So next slide. So the same, I think we have to go for vaccination until everyone, the entire society reaches herd immunity. Next slide, please. Same, double mask, sanitizer, and strictly maintaining social distance. So, and I think this is what I can convey. Awareness among every person. They should understand what is COVID. Understanding COVID is the only way we can come over this COVID, rather than neglecting and landing up in hospital. Okay, thank you.
Doctor, we have few questions. Tanay has been taking them. Tanay, whenever whichever questions were not answered,
Yes,
you can go ahead. I think doctor has like about 5. How many minutes you have, doctor? Before.
Yeah, we'll make it. We'll make it 10 minutes.
10 minutes question. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Tanay, go ahead.
okay. So I have a question which is more generic one. I will take first, and then we'll go to the specific ones.
Okay.
So there's a question from Mamta. She says, I see differences in doctor prescriptions. Some are recommending FabiFlu along with ivermectin, doxycycline, and zinc. Others are not including FabiFlu. Can you throw some more light on the differences?
Yes, I was expecting this pretty much, because still we are in a world of expert-based medicine bar evidence-based medicine. When I say evidence-based medicine, there should be some trials done on several centers, and it has to approve, and publications has to come, and they should be set up guidelines. Since COVID is something which has landed up very quickly, there is it's completely gray zone when it comes to medications. So as of now, except dexamethasone and to some extent remdesivir, there is not even one single drug which is proven that it helps, except with a previous experience dealing with other viral illness in before. There are few studies going on that this antiviral drug helps, that viral drug helps. My personal experience, actually speaking, I haven't used a favipiravir from almost last August. So a lot of doctors don't use. At the same time, when patients insist that should we use something, they say it's up to you. So some doctors use. So if you ask me, is it approved? US FDA didn't approve. UK, European authorities or boards didn't approve, except a few places like India, Russia, Bangladesh, China, they're using favipiravir. Otherwise, it is still not approved. So I say no for favipiravir.
Okay, thank you, doctor. There's another
And same is
question.
the case with ivermectin also. It's still not approved. Ivermectin is only approved in a very small study or trial which was done in Bangladesh. So it has its own criticism that how far it is done, and the sample size is very less. So it is still not completely approved or either by US or UK boards.
Okay, thank you. There's another question on the chat is like, can cardiac patients with stent on blood thinners take COVID vaccine?
Yeah,
And
yeah. This is something which is very strongly into everyone's minds. See, there are a couple of incidences or news journals coming up with incidents of thrombotic events or decreased platelet counts after taking vaccination. Yes, it happened with AstraZeneca vaccine, but if you see, it is only, I think, 1 in 4 lakhs. So considering the risk benefit ratio, and second thing is blood thinners, everyone has to understand there are two things. Antiplatelets is ecosprin and clopidogrel. This is one blood thinner. This is what lot of patients like cardiac patients use. The other variant is anticoagulants. So anticoagulants is something which makes your blood thin, but these are little powerful drugs that it is only recommended by the doctor in particular to certain things. So ecosprin, a lot of people use, but when I talk about anticoagulants is acitram or warfarin. When you are using this too, even those also, when you are INR, there is a test called as INR, International Normalized Ratio. If you are maintaining the values of INR normally, you can go for vaccine. So any people who are on anticoagulants, I repeat, anticoagulants are acitram and warfarin. So when you people are on this, or there is something called as rivaroxaban or apixaban, when you are on this drugs, please meet your doctor, whoever has advised that, and take the consult him whether you can go for vaccine or not. Ideally speaking, if any people on this drugs also, if they maintain this INR normal, they can go for vaccination. And for antiplatelets like ecosprin, people can straight away go for vaccine without any doubt.
okay, thank you, doctor. Doctor, there were some other questions which we had previously noted.
Yeah.
Now, since the hospitalization has become difficult due to non-availability of beds, how effective is home ICU setups these days that are available, and what if we should, whether we should go for them? What are the preparations we should do? Can you give some?
Again, when we talk about ICU, it is not a machine. So people have to understand ICU setup is something that a bunch of people, preferably a doctor and sister, who has to run 24 hours. Whoever are advertising that, they provide that. It all depends. So I keep telling to my patients as well as friends, don't ever tell that this hospital is good, that hospital is good. Rather tell the doctor is good, the doctor is bad. So similarly, this ICU also, if you have a capable, efficient doctor, I think the machinery is only an accessory thing. Machines are required, provided you don't have the brain behind the machine, there's no point. So
Okay.
ICUs at home quarantine, if we don't have a choice, yes, it is something is better than nothing types, provided if you have the brain behind.
Sir, I have a question. Tane, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Sunil, go on.
So, doctor, hi. My father is actually hospitalized for the last 7 days, and he has been given remdesivir for 5 days now, and he's on steroids, doctor. He's taking 40 mg thrice a day, but his oxygen levels right now are varying. It is still around 88, 89 most of the time. So, in this case, is there anything else that I need to, or we need to do, or do we just continue with the steroids and proning and basically the breathing exercises?
See, again, when we talk about a case scenario, I consider a lot of things. Name of the, age of the patient, male, female, what are his comorbidities, what is his picture when he has started coming to the hospital. Because whenever we talk about a clinical scenario, I always have to pinpoint at which phase of the illness the patient is. When I talk about COVID, it is 2 weeks of illness. The graph is all about 2 weeks. It starts on day 1, day 5 to day 7. You have high symptoms of fever, body pains, and something. So whatever bad impact a patient has gone through in the first week, the end result you start seeing in the second week. Like day 8 to day 13 is people land up in cytokine storm. So when you talk about a patient now, I always need all this
Okay.
information. But anyways, when you told me patient in ICU for the past 7-8 days,
Not
the
ICU,
best.
doctor. He's in a not in the ICU, but he's in a hospital, doctor.
Okay, and what is the current oxygen requirement? He's on
He's at 6 liters per minute, doctor.
6 liters with 88. Why don't we put it 8 to 10 liters for targeting 92? So I
Okay,
would target all my patients 92 at least minimum. So usually the best improvement should happen in first 3 to 4 days. If someone is not improving beyond 3 to 4 days, now these people are people who got stuck up. They had a significant damage. It takes longer period of time. Another important thing I tell all my patients, most of the doctors or even patients, everyone are rushing at supplementing oxygen. So someone needs oxygen, we add on oxygen, we do something. At the same time, all the medical people as well as the patients or attenders also should understand how to decrease the demand of oxygen. So you shouldn't
Okay,
talk.
doctor.
You have to relax as much as possible as someone is doing yoga. You should stop using your phone much. You should be in the prone position for as much as possible. So these are few things, because a lot of people who are anxious, panicking. So these are the people who consume more oxygen. So one should able, family side, you should give the moral support and assurance that you'll come out, you're okay, you're doing well, don't worry. So this people actually will come out well. So I think it is a moral support, and make sure that they relax in the best possible way, both from the doctor side as well as the patient side. And otherwise, I think your doctor or whatever they're doing the best. I would, as my personal experience, I would target 92 rather than I'm happy staying at 88. If someone is at 88, I'll still extend my oxygen until and unless I have a shortage of oxygen.
So thank you, sir. Just one last question, sir. All 4 people in the family were diagnosed with COVID, right? From the same strain, I'm assuming. So now, when we are isolating together, do we still have to be completely strict with wearing masks and isolating, or can we isolate together and that's fine?
Yeah, this is there is no proven studies telling that people all together staying at one place, you get cross infected one over the other and it will be synchronized. Nothing like that. See, virus once it enters into the body, there is no need of extra person giving you extra virus. Virus automatically multiplies in your body, so there is nothing else more required. I feel if whoever are at home, I say all positives at one place, all negatives at one place. So
Okay,
again,
sir.
positives need not search in different rooms.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sunil. Doctor, couple of questions. One is on the chat, people on blood pressure medication.
Tanay, keep it to 2 questions, I think.
Yeah, 2 questions. Yeah, Sunil. People on blood pressure medication, what precaution or medicine should they take before second dose of Covishield? Or in general, if anything,
No,
should they?
I would rather generalize the statement. Even in COVID, even with vaccine, you need not stop any of your regular medications. Let it be blood pressure, let it be diabetes, let it be thyroid, let it be cholesterol. None of these medications have nothing to do with COVID neither the vaccine. So no one needs to stop anything for this. So just understand it's when we take our kids to a pediatrician for vaccination, there is expected mild side effects. That's like a fever or pain for a day at the most or 2 days. So that's expected. So don't worry. It need not actually invite to stop rest of the medications which are mandatory or which you regularly use. Okay.
Okay. Last question, doctor. Can you shed some light on the plasma treatment? It's gaining a lot of.
So again, this is also important. I think I am one among those doctors who haven't used plasma from August. Okay, so it is little bit of understanding of the disease. Plasma is something about someone's antibodies, and any patient who has virus entered into the body, our own body develops antibodies within day 5 to day 6. Once you yourself develop antibodies, there is no role of someone giving you antibodies in the form of plasma, number one. Number two, the ideology of giving plasma is when someone feels helpless that we are giving everything, so let me give plasma also to control the disease. In the sense, a patient who come to the hospital, many of the times they come after 5 days or 7 days or 10 days only when he's sick. When someone is sick enough, I personally feel he fits into after 8 days or 10 days in the graph of the illness. When someone is 8 days or 10 days after the graph in the illness, there is no role of plasma at all. But still, patients are insecure, doctors are confused. Sometimes doctors are bound to give because patients are insisting. I think one should be bold enough to tell when it is no, it is not useful, it is not useful. So I think not that I make it very strong point, but it is not approved so far. And it is clearly told in recent NEJM articles also, plasma has no role until and unless it is given in first 5 to 7 days, preferably in first 5 days. But the funniest part is first 5 days, no one comes to the hospital. So frankly speaking, plasma is a big no.
Okay. Thank you, doctor, for all those insights. I think most of the questions were covered. Thank you for your time. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you so much, doctor, for taking a session on the COVID and educating us about the COVID and what all things we can do to minimize it, plus what if we get it, what should we worry about, or how should we approach about it. Okay, so one of the participant has asked your number, so I will share. I think it's the same person, Sunil. We wanted to follow up with you. So if you don't mind, I'll give you your number. So he wants to do a video consultation with you later.
Sure.
So anything else to add in the?
I think my strong message to everyone: this is a tough time what we are going through. Going to hospital and later suffer is much more dangerous than being very, very vigilant. So everyone has to be vigilant with the help of a pulse oximeter and try. For all practical purposes, every single fever is COVID until proven otherwise. So act early. So I strictly try to educate or create this awareness in my Facebook page as well as Insta. So any one of you can go through and take a look. I do, but a few very strong thing is act early campaign. The campaign which I am trying to do, anyone who is suspecting COVID, act early. If you deny and delay, it is only that damage and death is what it leads to. Take care.
Okay. Thank you so much, doctor. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.